Thank you, Rob, and thank you all for coming here today and for taking an hour of your busy schedules. Reality is, 5 years ago, I would have never wasted an hour of my time attending a parenting presentation because I parented the way my parents did, quite strict, but I thought I turned out okay, so why would I do things differently? Until one day, an event at home actually made me really wonder if I was doing things right. So it was a Saturday. My 4.5-year-old daughter, Noor, was serving herself some salad. She dropped a salad leaf on the table. Just asked nicely, "Oh, Noor, could you please pick this up?" She ignored me. I said, "Noor, you dropped a salad leaf, please pick it up." She ignored me. Then I used my default method at the time, my technique to get my children to do things, which was counting to 3. Anyone else count to 3? Show of hands. Usually about 90%, so the rest are probably doing. And I went, "Okay, Noor, I'm counting to 3. That's a 1. Ignore me. That's a 2. Ignore me again. I went, "Noor, you don't want me to get to 3, do you?" 2.5. 2 3/4. And then I got to 3. And the reality is I had no idea what I was going to do. The only thing I knew was my authority was based on that and the fear of getting to 3. And it used to work so well, and suddenly it didn't. And unfortunately, I did not react the best way possible. I actually started screaming and shouting and pulled her up, put her in her room, lecturing her, "How dare you let me get to 3? Do you realize what that means?" And I realized that day that actually my whole authority was based out of the fear that my children had. And they were doing this out of fear, so I was really managing my fear. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, and how much parallels there are between leadership skills and parenting skills. So the outline for today is actually explain to you how I learned that parenting skills can be improved. Then I'm going to talk to you about what parenting and leadership have in common. Then we're going to actually work together on defining what the key leadership skills are. And finally, I'll show you how to apply some of these workplace skills at home. So I'll share with you 5 very effective tools to replace the typical, basically, the 1, 2, 3, the parenting by fear or parenting by rewards, actually, because it's the carrot and stick approach. My objective here today is really to give you alternatives to the carrot and stick approach that are so ingrained in our culture. Because it's all about usually rewards, punishment, threats, and management basically by fear of rewards. So hopefully you'll leave here with alternatives to that. So how did it all start? Well, I already explained I was a stricter parent, and my wife was actually a lot more, let's say, lenient. I sometimes say permissive, although she doesn't like it. And so that's how our daily interactions look like. And the problem is actually the harsher I was, and the kinder she was. So I had clearly had the bad cop role. She had the good cop role. Anyone else experiences this at home? Yeah, about 60%. Well, actually, the research shows that it's 75% of parents argue about how to parent, and more than 50% of these arguments are around how to discipline children. So that's what we experience on a daily basis. And it almost got to break point, particularly after the incident, the salad leaf incident that I mentioned. And thankfully, my wife reacted very well to that. And she actually started looking for things she could do better. So she stopped blaming me for being the strict parent and the harsher parent. And she started looking at ways she could improve. And she actually started proving to me that she could get obedience and respect without having to shout and punish. And that's finally, she had, I was listening. So instead of just telling me, "Oh, here's this parenting book you should read," and I tell her, "Oh, please give me an exec summary and show me it works. I don't have time for this." Well, finally, she actually did it. And she showed me that, so she actually set better limits. She became more consistent. And it really changed the whole family dynamic. And so I became interested, and I became softer. And so when I started looking at research, becoming interested in the subject, and I realized how much parallels there were between leadership and parenting. And actually that parenting skills, like leadership skills, can be learned and can be honed. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So first, let's start with leadership. Obviously, there are so many definitions. So I picked one that's actually quite broad, but I think really shows what we want to do with our children. It's from Dwight Eisenhower, and it says, leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something we want done because they want to do it. Isn't that what we're trying to achieve on a daily basis with our children? Wouldn't it be great if we had tools to actually get them to do things because they want to do it, not because we're telling them over and over again, you've got to do this, please do this, do that, etc., giving them orders all day long. Well, so that's very much actually leadership and parenting have a lot of parallels. And what they have in common, I really like this quote from Simon Sinek, who you probably know, author of Start With Why. It's great leaders are able to inspire people to act. Those who are able to inspire give people a sense of purpose or belonging that has little to do with any external incentive or benefit to be gained. If you replace the word leaders with parents here, so great parents are able to inspire their children to act. Those who are able to inspire give children a sense of purpose of belonging that has little to do with any external incentive or benefit to be gained. And this is really very much so, that's exactly what we were saying about moving from the carrot and stick approach to the inspiring and leading by example. Another great quote from Jack Welch, former CEO of GE, is, before you're a leader, success is all about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others. Again, if you replace the word leaders with parents here, is before you are a parent, success is all about growing yourself. But when you become a parent, success is really about growing your children. So the last quotes I'm going to show you are about why leadership is actually here in this sense is different from management. So, because I spoke about management by fear, and that's exactly, we want to replace it with leadership. And so management is about arranging and telling, while leadership is about nurturing and enhancing. And as Klaus Balkenhol, Olympic champion, said, there is a difference between being a leader and being a boss. Both are based on authority. A boss demands blind obedience, while a leader earns his authority through understanding and trust. So why don't we give a go at actually defining what the key leadership skills. What have you experienced, either as a manager and actually something that's worked really well for you in inspiring your teams, or if you've had managers and leaders who've really inspired you? What are the key things that they've done well that you remember? Great communication. You can shoot. I can do several things at the same time.
Being empathetic.
Empathetic.
Having a plan.
Sorry?
Having
Having
a plan.
a plan. Great.
Can show you so they're an example of what they're asking.
Can I call this leading by example? Yeah?
They listen.
Listening, empathy, empathetic listening. Yeah, it's a different. Actually, if you don't mind, I'll later put this into emotional intelligence. Empathetic and listening are very much about having. Yes.
Stay calm during crisis.
Stay calm during crisis. Whoops. Anything else that comes to mind?
They know when to delegate.
Delegation. So
They're
inspirational.
inspirational.
Setting a purpose or vision.
Vision and purpose.
They have fun.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Having fun.
Have fun. Okay. Fun. Can I also say positive attitude in there?
They serve as your advocate.
Sorry, have space for two more. What?
They serve as your advocate.
They're
Serve as an advocate.
serve
As an advocate.
advocate. They sorry.
Advocate for their team.
They're advocate for the team. Yeah.
Provide a safe place to fail.
And I heard safe place to fail.
Yeah.
Yes, very good.
Along with that, coaching and out of that problem.
Well, I absolutely love doing this exercise. Because every time, this is a great list. And you'll see, no surprise, I'll have my list at the end. It's the same. So thank you very much. And actually, I'm going to hopefully show you 5 tools. Well, not hopefully. I'm going to show you 5 tools that use all of these skills and how to apply them at home. So the first one is about strategy and anticipating issues. I'd like to share with you a story of, so we had just moved home. I had a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old at that time. And they were arriving half an hour late for breakfast, which meant no breakfast. We didn't have time, so we had to just rush to school. So I sat down with them on a Sunday, and I asked my 6-year-old, Noor, how long do you need to get dressed in the morning? She answered, 2 minutes. I said, okay, so you're actually currently taking half an hour for something you could do in 2 minutes. Okay, so what could we do differently? And she actually came up with the idea that why don't we write down timings so that we actually know what time we should be going down. I said, that's a great idea, let's do it. And it was actually a 2-hour, in the end, a 2-hour activity where the kids, I took photos of the kids as they were doing the different activities, so making their bed, brushing their teeth, their hair, getting dressed. And then we put it in order. They actually ordered the way they wanted, and we put timings. They didn't really have a sense of time, particularly the 4-year-old at the time, but I helped them with that. Turned out actually to be one of the best things we've ever done. Because the next day, they arrived half an hour earlier than usual. We had lots of time to have breakfast and have lots of fun. Anyone actually already uses routines? Creates a routine, yeah? Yeah, kind of, yeah. About 20, 25%. Did you involve your children in creating this routine? Yeah? Some yes, some no, yeah? Well, it's very much, it is very much about involving. So the idea of creating routines is really steps in schedule to make them the boss. So with younger children, as I just showed, you can have photos of the different steps, and I'll ask them to reorder them as they want. With older children, agree on a schedule with them. What's important about this is really about using this so the routine becomes the boss, as in, what are you supposed to do now? Instead of, oh, you still didn't brush your teeth. What have you put in your schedule? What have you put in your routine? And automatically it gives an ownership and empowerment to the children to want to do things. And so it removes a lot of the resistance that we experience in the morning. The other one about being strategic is redesign agreements. Is realizing where are our key issues. And often it's going to be supermarket or when we go to a friend's house, and it's all about agreeing with your children what's okay with you. So clarifying expectations at any age. So for younger children, for example, you can use what we call an iMessage. It's, I take children to the supermarket who will listen to me, who will not be trying to buy everything on the touching everything on the shelves, and etc. What works for you, and ideally you involve them. So you say, for example, you will help me put things that are on your list of your things, so that are usually, actually they're very good supermarkets in doing this and putting them at the right height. And also, for example, I'm willing to buy you one thing under £2-3, whatever works for you. Just having this expectation, having clarified this, and if you want role play is great, for example, for when you go to a friend's house and you, instead of going, oh, say hello, say goodbye, say thank you. I mean, how often do we repeat these things to our children? Well, reality is, instead, if we role play and ask them, so Granny's going to say hello, what are you going to say? Oh, hello, okay. She's going to give you a piece of cake. What are you going to do? Oh, I'll say thank you. Just going through that with them, when I'm talking here about younger children, will enable them to get it in their long-term memory, and you'll be a lot sure that they actually do this regularly rather than you having to repeat it to them all the time. So that's about being more strategic. Effective communication. Obviously, great communication is so important. And reality is, often it's not about what we say, but how we say it. So can you try and guess how many orders and commands a child gets every hour on average? Is it 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40? Any guesses? 30 to 40. 40. Wow. First time I guessed the exact, that it's actually 34. Very good. So it's 34 orders. So how would it go down with you if your boss gave you 34 orders every hour? Yeah, you can imagine. Well, so it actually explains very well the resistance they have from the age of 2, 3. I mean, they've received so many orders through their childhood and so many no's that it's pretty normal for them to react like this. So what are the alternatives? What is great communication with children? It was actually trying to replace at least 90% of these orders with, first tool of all, questions. So think about, actually, is this new information? So every time you say something, a child is like, is this new information? Do you think that 90%, about 90% will probably be new, old information? And so instead of like repeating yourself, ask them, what are you, so the same with creative routines, what are you supposed to do now? What do we do when we come out, before we leave, after we come back from, whatever your rules are, they know them. So put them in thinking mode a lot more, and they'll actually be a lot less resistant. Questions work also very well when they make a mistake. What are you going to do now? Because usually we tell them, oh, take the mop, for example, they spill something, take the mop, do this, do that, because we're quite annoyed. Well, actually, giving them the opportunity to correct their mistake and have a safe place to fail, is essential. Please, welcome. So that's what, it's really replacing our orders with, so asking questions. The other one, which is also a question, is limited choices. Anyone use limited choices? So for example, it's not like, oh, what do you want for breakfast this morning? And then you never get an answer, or because it creates anxiety. It's actually much better to say, we'd like porridge or cereals. Would you like juice or milk? So all limited choices actually keep our children in thinking mode and removes a lot of the resistance that we experience. And I'm talking at any age. We just think, oh, they're old enough. Come on, why am I going to give them choices? Well, actually, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, they prefer choices to, hey, you didn't do that, or you forgot to do this. The other way about effective communication is actually reducing the use of no. No is actually one of the most dangerous words in the world. Research shows that it reduces motivation. It affects us actually physically. And it's a word that we repeat so often. Often, actually, we start our sentences with no when we want to say yes. So I challenge you to try and start most of your sentences with yes. At home and at work, by the way. And it's yes, and if it doesn't work for you, it's yes, and we can do this later. For example, I want an ice cream. Yes, sure, you can have it at the weekend. That's our rule at home. Yes, 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 but redirect. You'll see the difference. Instead of going, okay, no, I want one, you'll go, oh, okay. Or ask a question. Is it time to have an ice cream? So really, it's the same tools you use at work to motivate your teams or actually have a good relationship with your colleagues. I challenge you to do more of this at home. Other big theme, leading by example. And instead of do as I say and not as I do, do as I say and as I do. And as I was doing research, I realized a defining moment for me was to realize that I was making it harder for my children to do what I was asking from them. I would often say, stop crying, calm down. Anyone else? You stop crying, calm down? Pretty common. Well, actually, what research shows is that when we do this, they're probably already in what we call fight or flight mode. They're already, in a state where they're really finding it hard actually to get out of it. When we raise our voices and we say, stop crying, calm down, actually, it increases the level of cortisol in their body. Instead of coming back to their prefrontal cortex, this logical part of the brain where we want them to be, they're actually in their primitive brain, what we also called the chimp in some management books. And so if we actually, I realized that I was making it harder for them to do these things, while what we should do is actually anticipate a lot of the issues, as we saw earlier, and help them get out. Replace the cortisol with oxytocins, with dopamine. So the right hormones to actually be wanting to do things. And so I actually had a big experience when my Noor was 5, and she spoke to me for the first time, in an incredibly disrespectful voice. And I just was going to just fly off the wall. I mean, I was so angry. But I realized that we were both in our chimp, in our primitive brain. So I used what I call ABC. So A for acknowledge my feeling. I'm very angry. B for breathe. And C for choice. And actually, I made the choice to remove myself from the situation rather than lecture her and scold her right there and then. And as I gave myself some time, I realized that she spoke in exactly the same way as I had been doing for the last few years. And the problem is actually they've got deferred memory. So it only came out at 5. So for the ones who have younger children, hopefully you can still correct things so that you don't end up having children who actually speak to you in exactly the same way you speak to them. And obviously, it's not respectful. You can't speak to an adult like this, but ideally, we should be leading by example. And obviously that applies, it's easy to apply this to stricter parents and parents who get angry. But I also want to share with you a story of a couple who seemed like the absolutely most amazing, perfect parents. And they had a daughter called Lisa, and they simply adored her, and they decided to give her unconditional love. So as she was born, they take her everywhere with them. Until the age of 2, they didn't even take a night out together. But so when she turned 2, they decided to book a babysitter. And they told Lisa, oh, we booked a babysitter, we really want this night out. She threw a tantrum. They canceled the babysitter. Then Lisa turned out to be this lovely girl. She grew up to, always very generous, like giving her lunch whenever someone else didn't have lunch, always being responsible for brownies at parties. But unfortunately, when she turned 14, she became angry, resentful, and her parents could not understand. And so they kept telling her, but we sacrificed everything for you. How can you treat us like this? So they went to see a psychiatrist, friend of theirs. They told him the story, and he said, well, unfortunately, you trained her that way. They're like, what do you mean? We did everything. We've been so nice. And what do you mean we trained her that way? He told them, well, unfortunately, actions speak louder than words. And what you've modeled is actually that your needs were not so important, and her needs. You didn't model how to say no. You didn't actually develop her frustration and disappointment muscle. So what's happening to her is simply that she cannot cope. She does not have the coping mechanism of emotions to manage her emotions. And so that was a huge realization for my wife, who actually tended to be more like this. And so you can see that from both sides of the spectrum. So leading by example is really about actions, and that speak louder than words. So how can you implement this on a daily basis? For example, if you want your children to be grateful, you can actually show gratitude. If you want them to be, so for example, you want them to know how to fail and how to accept mistakes, you can share your mistakes. We do that during our dinners when we manage to have dinner together. We share the mistakes we made and what we learned from them, because we realized that our children were starting to be a bit perfectionist, which is actually very common nowadays. So you can implement, you can really lead by example and bring these things into your daily lives. So hopefully you will have good followers. So I want to actually ask you, I'm sure that you have regular meetings, internal meetings at work. Surely that's quite regular, common. So what are actually the goals and objectives of these meetings? So why do you have internal meetings? Can you give me ideas?
You talk through what's happening in the week.
So talk through. So basically you're discussing.
Like
Sure.
the agenda for the week, whatever.
Yeah, agenda, sure. So we're kind of planning, agenda for week and planning. Anything else?
Assess past efforts. Assess past performance.
Assess performance. Does that actually happen on a weekly basis? Anything else? Do you
Reach an agreement.
reach agreements? So negotiate. Yeah. So negotiate. Would it be solve solutions? So negotiate to agree on solutions to problems, or just negotiate? Okay.
Highlight problems
Highlight problems.
and address them.
Praise and recognition. Yes. So can I add to this that it would be motivating maybe as well? So you get praise and motivation to recognition to motivate. Set expectations. Okay. I'll one last one.
Strengthen relationship.
Strengthen relationship. Yeah, bonding, strengthen relationship. Great, and I like that we finished on that. Because when you see this list, can you see how it would be useful to have this at home as well? Bonding, set expectations, praise and recognition, highlight problems and address them, obviously, problem solving, reach agreements. So now I have a question for you is, how many of you have regular family meetings on a weekly basis? Great question. Meals do not count. It's usually 5%. Come on, tell me someone does regular meetings. Once a week? No? Okay. Well, this is really the most important tool in the book. So thanks for being honest. And family meetings are actually run very much like a business meeting. They've got, aim for doing it once a week, because what you don't want is actually for children to think that you're only doing them when there's a big problem. Because otherwise they become reluctant to do them, while the idea is to have a real motivation to do them, because it is a real bonding experience. So elect a chairperson and a secretary. The reason for this is because if you don't, then they can go completely, you need someone to manage. But the secretary is really important. And actually, children from the age of 5, 6 love to take the secretary and actually just write the meeting, the minutes down. An agenda. Of course, we need an agenda. And actually, on the agenda, we start with compliments and gratitude. So, for example, our 5-year-old daughter told our 3-year-old daughter at some point, "Oh, Yasmin, thank you for biting me less this week." And that actually came from a previous family meeting the week before, where we gave Yasmin ideas on how she could bite less. So it had worked quite well. What each family member is proud of. That's actually something that at 7, our daughter said, "Oh, can I talk to myself? I'm grateful for actually having finished Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and reading so much better." We said, "Oh, so you're proud of this?" "Yeah, sure, of course, you can be proud of yourself." And actually, it's a great moment to show what we're proud of as adults and to lead by example, and for our children to know how to focus on the positives and not just the negatives.
Is
Yeah.
that personal related, like as in only family related, or would you talk about work and that?
So it is only, so the question is about whether it's work or family related. It's actually family related. There's already so much to talk about on a weekly basis, or even if you do it bi-weekly, it's really effective. It completely changes the family dynamic. So the next step, which is really the one that every parent wants to get to, is the needs, problem solving. Let's actually address all the issues we have. So the way we did it, the girls already had an idea of what a family meeting was. And that day, we asked them what their needs were. So that's what's so important, is actually for children to feel that they also have their needs met. They'll start probably with, "Oh, I want to go to Disneyland Paris, and they want to do this and that." You tell them, "Oh, sure, we'll put this on the agenda for the future, but right now, do you have any needs?" So my 4-year-old daughter said, "Daddy, I'd like you to shout less." I was going to go, "But I'm already shouting so much less. Don't you see the efforts I'm making? I mean, you should come on." And then I was going to go, "Well, you make me shout." I stopped myself in my tracks, and I said, "Oh, you want me to shout less? Well, I'd love to do that, actually, and I promise I'm going to make a conscious effort. But so why don't we actually, as a family, think about what we could do to have less screaming generally, because there is quite a bit of shouting in the family." So we brainstormed and actually realized that a lot of shouting happened in the morning, because this great routine that we created. The problem is now they had half an hour to have all the time for breakfast and fun. Well, we still ended up being late for school, because then by the time we told them, "Okay, now it's time to get ready, to finalize the dressing so we can get out of the door," it'd take 15 minutes instead of the 2 or 3 that it should take. So we brainstormed ideas, and actually I said, you could actually wake up earlier, so you'd have to go to sleep earlier. They said, no, that doesn't work because we wouldn't see you, Dad. You come back late from work, so no, let's try something else. So they actually came up with a simple idea. Just remind us by singing. So unfortunately, I had to sing, let us go, let us go. It was a big Frozen mania. And so I said, really, you want me to do this? I hate singing. Okay, I'll do that. Next morning, I went, let us go, let us go. They put their skates on. They were like 2 minutes. They were ready at the door. I was like, wow, that looks like magic. Well, the reality is because they found the solution, because they agreed on this, we also use now, thankfully, they don't ask me to sing too much, but they ask me, for example, to use respect, or rewind. So if they've done something that they're not supposed to do, instead of immediately lecture them, they have an opportunity by saying rewind, for example, they have an opportunity to do it better. And this is an amazing way for them to acknowledge their mistake and to actually practice doing things better. So, and that all came out of our family meetings and our problem-solving sessions. So in summary, the way to do a problem-solving session is you say, what could we do about it? Then you generate possible alternative solutions together. Ideally, you find more than one solution so you can get buy-in. You know how at work, if someone comes up with a solution and you just get on, you just think, but I'm sure there was a better idea. So ideally, you find 2 or 3 solutions and all agree on what the best one is. And after each option you should ask, how would that work for you? To really empower your children to choose the best option. So we decide together on the best acceptable solution. And finally, we ask them, how would they like to be reminded? So in this case, they would want it to be reminded with a singing or with a word like respect or rewind. And finally, I would suggest, particularly with older children, to ask them what the consequence would be if they don't end up complying. You do tell them, look, I totally trust that we've done this together, you've agreed, so you're going to do it. But sometimes, we slip in life, it happens. And so if you agree on a consequence, and in this case, actually, the agreement was, in the case, the story I just told you, was that they would have to go to sleep earlier and wake up earlier. So it's not a punishment, it's just a simple, natural, logical consequence of their actions. And the more you do this, the more they actually start realizing that it's not about punishment, and it's just that in life, you just have normal consequences to your actions. And so that's a great way to achieve this. So how to create a shared purpose, actually, is the final point. Is you also either do a problem-solving session, or you do what we call, you try and instill family culture. Reality is, company culture happens whether we want it or not. And actually, as you know, companies spend so much money on making sure that the culture is communicated, that we are all aware of it. Well, in our family lives, unfortunately, often we don't realize that we are creating culture whether we want it or not. So my intention here is just to make you realize that by becoming more intentional about it, it's much better. So how we define a family culture? It's the unique way that a family forms itself in terms of rules, roles, habits, activities, beliefs, and other areas. And you can imagine that these things just happen naturally. So actually, when we become more intentional about them, it enables us to decide what we want to be as a family, have more vision and strategy. So fun, sporty, kind, curious. What are the values we want to instill to our children? Care of self, care for others. Effort is good. Whatever works for you, every family is different. But just becoming more conscious and strategic about this can make a huge difference to your children as they grow. And so ask yourself, what actions can lead to this? Agree during a family meeting that, okay, let's do more of this because we want to be like this as a family. And try, actually, if you have older children, ask them, what do you think our values are? Do kind of what we call a 2-minute quiz. So, okay, tell us in 3-4 words what you feel that we are as a family. And you'd be surprised sometimes at the answers they can give you. And so ideally, you actually, if you're not happy with the answers, then you get an opportunity to discuss these and make sure that you correct things before it's too late. So overall, you want to finish on a positive note, because it's like like feedback, sorry. You want to do it as a sandwich. Positive, so compliments and gratitude. Then you put the problem solving, the part where, hey, we've got problems, let's solve them. But you want to finish on a positive note. So after problem solving family culture, we plan activities and family fun, what you usually do in work meetings as well. Play a family game if you've got time, because obviously these things sometimes we skip the problem solving because we don't have problems. We just use the family meeting as a bonding session. So we have time for a family game. And it's a bit cheesy, but we always finish with a family hug, and children love it. So overall, I wanted to check with you, what leadership skills do you feel that we've used actually, coming back to everything you've defined? Well, I mean, I promised I would show you my list. Well, here it is. Vision and strategy. So family culture, anticipating issues. It's very much about vision and strategy. Leading by example. I think I went through that in detail. Effective communication. The replacement of all the negatives, the orders, with more motivating techniques. Collaborative as well as directive. It's very important to actually, when you do a family meeting, you're asking them to also collaborate, to find solutions to their problems, to empower them. Emotional intelligence, ability to listen, to be empathetic with our children. Motivating and inspiring. Valuing mistakes as opportunities for learning, as we said, teach them to fail and lead by example. Positive attitude and flexibility, pragmatism. Trust and integrity. And finally, something we couldn't be parents without is determination and commitment. And I want to acknowledge you all as parents, because we have a tough job. And so hopefully this session has given you a bit more ideas on how to address these challenging times and really find solutions. Realize that actually it is all about being a leader at home, as we want to be leaders at work. And by applying these techniques, we can really make our family lives easier and more harmonious. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nadim. It's 1:15, so we have about 10 minutes for questions or so. Please use the mic to answer the question. Any questions from the floor?
Yeah, I was just wondering about ages where you kind of start some of this, because I've got young children, so I totally see the benefit of what you're talking about, but I also think they're not going to get it yet. So when...
Can I ask how old your children are?
2 and 0.
Well, congratulations on the... 2 actually is a great age to start, particularly limited choices, asking questions, making sure basically you want to remove the resistance that comes with, I don't know if autonomy, there is this need for autonomy and identity that comes in human beings, and it comes in peaks. It comes at 2. That's what explains the terrible 2s. It comes back at 12, which is, adolescence and all the upheaval. Then comes back at 40, explains a lot of the midlife crisis. And then again at 80. So 2 is really a great moment to start and apply a lot of, basically remove the resistance, creating routines, everything basically, a lot of the, and leading by example. You can start at any age. I hope you can use some of the, we have talks that is more specific for younger children, but I hope that some of the ideas here you can definitely implement.
Thank you. The kind of frustration, I guess, that I have with my kids is that, and this could go on, by the way. The frustration, I think, is that the ability for me to, or the inability of me to articulate, kind of do the boring stuff to get to the fun stuff. So that brushing teeth, and I get what you're saying about routine, but I guess I have trouble articulating, like, it'll take you 2 minutes to brush your teeth, and then you get 20 minutes to mess about. And the whole process to get them from start to finish will take 25 minutes. You know what I mean? And I have trouble articulating that to them. Can you please help?
Yes. And I agree. I still get frustrated this, because actually it's understanding what is age appropriate was the hardest bit for me. Realizing that actually the prefrontal cortex, so this logical part of the brain, understanding what the consequence of our actions That takes until the age of 25. That's actually when we become really adults, when our prefrontal cortex stops growing. Until then, unfortunately, they don't have hindsight. They don't realize that, oh, of course I could, unless we do it outside of the act, which is why the whole idea of routines, of problem solving, is doing when they're not already in this kind of resistance and outside of the prefrontal cortex. And so these tools to remind them that we agree that it's much better. So because so you do a problem solving section, you say, would you prefer to dress for 25 minutes and then have 2 minutes to play, or would you have to dress for 2 minutes and actually play for 25? That's what, play 25, dress 2 minutes, great, okay. And that's where you're going to say, okay, well, we have agreement on that. What can I do to remind you that this is what you want? They'll give you an idea, and I promise, try it at home. You will, it's not going to work 100% of the time, but it's going to work, it's particularly at the beginning, if you're consistent about it, because you empowered them to decide for themselves, and you reminded them in a nice, fun way. So it unfortunately takes more effort, but unfortunately that's what our children have to go through. We're here to coach them to really develop this prefrontal cortex. Because what we want is for them to reach adolescence and not make huge mistakes. And mistakes suffer from inflation. So the younger they make mistakes, the better. Because when they're 14, 15 and they go into a car with someone who's drunk, etc., you want them to anticipate, to realize the consequence of this. And so the more we actually teach them the consequence of their actions early on, the better, the more their prefrontal cortex is going to be developed, and the better they're going to react to this. So it takes more time, but it's so worth it, because then you get into this really, you have this shared purpose and this sense of motivation to want to do things because they want to do them, not because we're after them. And because you could be playing, come on. Very frustrating, but it's
Question here.
I have a lovely, adorable daughter. Well, until she turned 13 months and she realized she can have an opinion. We are struggling, me and my wife, to figure out how do we negotiate with her. She's 13 months, she can understand what we want to tell her, but she realized she can have an opinion. She can wake up and decide, I'm not going to sleep. We don't just let her cry herself to sleep, but we want to find a way of negotiating with her. She will decide she'll not have breakfast this morning. She doesn't like the milk is too cold or it's too warm. So
thanks for the question. It is very much, if I may, I think the word negotiation is in itself, ideally you move away from negotiating with your children, because otherwise everything turns into a negotiation. So what we want is actually for them to have a sense of control. That's crucial. So for them not to be a 2 and just be resistant and not want to do anything. But so giving them limited choices. So for example, do you want your milk cold or hot? So you're anticipating the issue. Before she tells you, oh, I want my milk hot actually. So you allow her to make decisions based on limited choices. That will be usually helpful. But you do not negotiate. And then if it's actually she decided she wanted it cold, and she then goes, no, actually I want it hot. She's like, next time, darling, today you decided cold. Because otherwise, it's her way to control you. Because they do have this need for control. So don't get me wrong, it's totally normal. It's age appropriate. But you want to teach them that they can have control, but on your terms. Otherwise, they're running the show. And then you've got a really difficult life, because it all turns out into a negotiation. So limited choices, asking questions, and enforceable statements, which is another one I didn't really mention. For example, children in this house who want to have dessert must have eaten their meal, for example. So instead of, if you don't do this, you won't get that, which is very threatening and it immediately creates opposition, you try and create more positive ways. So as soon as you've done that, you can do this. So it doesn't put the child in resistance mode. I hope that helps.
Next to giving them control, do you have some suggestions on how to let them break rules and be transgressive? Because that's like why they are wired at a certain age to then try to break the rules. And how would you suggest to do that? So
the question is, how often should you let them break the rules, or should you let them break the rules at all? What's the question?
So the question stems from the fact that they are wired to break the rule at some point. And no, I have a feeling that no, giving them too much of this management and leadership style might then transform them into anarchists, that they just want to avoid all of that when they are teenagers. So how do you allow for an element of breaking the rules?
Okay, so well, that's a tough one, because my wife and I would answer differently, because she would allow more exceptions. Because of my parenting style, I allow less exceptions, and I think that's what we're talking about here. My view of life is actually there are rules everywhere, and actually my children have to learn that early on. So I wouldn't allow for a lot of breaking rules. To make up for that they're not allowed to break up many rules, there are some exceptions. So I say, okay, you know what? I'll make an exception. Go ahead, for example, break a rule that is not so important for me, or so choose your battles. It's fine. But the rest of the time, I make it clear that that's the rule. But to make up for that rigidity, you actually create a lot of autonomy within. You offer a lot of choices. You anticipate a lot of issues by actually having conversations, by being collaborative. So they feel they have a say and they're empowered, and they feel they've got a shared purpose and belonging. As long as you have this, you'd be surprised that children actually are a lot less intent on breaking the rules, just to break them. They break them because they're like, oh my God, there are so many rules, I can't bear all of this. So as long as you give enough control and autonomy, children will actually learn to make mistakes, and it's fine, but there are consequences to this. So they learn that there are consequences to their mistakes. It's not big punishment and, oh, horrible. It's actually, the idea is not to make children feel worse in order to do better. It's for them to always feel good and to want to be in this family and want to do things correctly, because they see that, oh, otherwise, my parents are not going to be happy, or it's not actually, it's counter to the way the family functions. So hopefully it's that, it's for you to decide how many exceptions you're going to make, but if you make too many, then you're letting them run the show and not realize there is a consequence and that there are rules, while you want to teach them there are rules.
So sometimes breaking rules, or at least perceived rules, can be a good thing. Are you concerned, or is there any evidence to show, or counter evidence, that you're going to end up raising a child who isn't capable of breaking rules or perceived rules as an adult? Because I want my son to be able to break rules sometimes.
Totally. Again, it's a similar question, and I understand that. And it's funny because I rarely get these kind of questions, so clearly Google is very much, it is part of the Google culture, and I think it's great. I think it's, you want to question, the rules, and otherwise you can't actually create a lot. I think it's about finding this right balance, as I was explaining, but really it's offering a lot of autonomy and a lot of opportunities to do things differently and to decide what the rules are. So, for example, in a problem-solving session, you're not imposing your rule on your children. You're telling them, okay, that's what we want as an outcome as a family. So what are the right rules for our family to achieve this? And sometimes you'll go against your feeling, like, oh my God, really? But you'll go with it. And you'll just go, okay, I don't really agree, but I'll go with that. That in itself is kind of a way to teach them to think differently, to think outside of the box, and to find solutions to problems. I think that's what we want to achieve. Just breaking the rules for the sake of breaking them is kind of will go against you. And sometimes, it's fine. They have to make mistakes, by the way. Huh? So it's not like that we're going to create these perfect kids who never break the rules. It's just when they break them, instead of getting angry and thinking, oh my God, how dare you do that, it's actually, oh, so sad. Yeah, you know what the rules are. So that's a mistake. It's okay. That's the consequence that you agreed on. And then instead of going, no, that's not fair, they'll go, yeah, I decided this consequence. It's fine. And it can be tough, but it's fine. I hope that answers.
Hi, thanks for the talk. My kids are 8 and 12. We have some routines that work quite well for us, but then we have some which have been really long established and which we'd like to change because they don't necessarily work out now. So, for example, we used to always get them to do some piano practice after dinner, but we find these days that perhaps everybody's a bit tired then, and piano practice can get a bit confrontational, and we'd like to bring it earlier in the day, maybe before dinner, and so then we're met with big resistance. And I wondered if you had tips on how to kind of deal with that.
So is there resistance because they just want to have fun before and that, and they're used to doing it after, or where the
It's
resistance
because
comes from?
in their mind, piano practice is always after dinner.
Okay,
or at least
so
that's
they're-
it's voiced. I mean, maybe there's something else, but that's the objection that we're given.
Yeah, well, this is usually that's very much the purpose of a family meeting, is when it's outside of this kind of resistance already, you should do it before. Where you can agree on why it's better for them to do it earlier. I mean, that's where usually when you get buy-in, it's like any meeting. To get buy-in, they mustn't be in resistant mode. They have to realize what the intention is and why it's better. And or otherwise you say, well, the consequence could be, well, you have to have dinner earlier, and maybe then we can't participate in dinner. I mean, things you can actually make things up so that to make sure that. I mean, it's just showing them the consequence of not going that way, without it being, a battle. Because that's what you want to remove in everything we do, is remove this battle, these positions, that it's a win-lose situation. Actually, everything is a win-win situation. I mean, we're doing this for our kids, so they have to realize it. And the more you create this environment of shared purpose and we have the same goals, the more you can achieve no resistance to piano practice. Actually, yeah, it's true. Actually, I'm going to do it. Do it. Be creative. That's what I mean. And they're going to be your best creative. They're going to bring the best creative ideas. So allow them to have these ideas, because maybe they'll come up with something that works for you, and that you didn't even think about. So have these conversations.
Great. With that, please join me in a massive round of applause for Nadim Saad.